suspected invasion by the Allies were relayed both to North America and to Germans in the homeland. Germans at home were told by DNB's domestic broadcast at dawn in Europe. At 1:30 in the morning, Eastern Wartime, the DNB agency repeated the items describing what it called the invasion operations. This was a departure from the usual DNB practice of giving fresh information at that time. The German-controlled Calais radio came on the air today with this announcement in the English language, quote, "This is D-Day. We shall now bring music for the Allied invasion forces." So said the German-controlled Calais radio across the channel from England. Up to this time, almost an hour and a half after the first German broadcast, the United States Office of War Information, whose facilities will be used by American press organizations when Allied armies enter Western Europe, has not transmitted any information at all to support the German claims.
Yes, sir.
Director Elmer Davis of the OWI rushed to his headquarters immediately when OWI officials advised him of the broadcast from Germany. He told the United Press, "We have no more information than you have. I'll stay here until I find out whether the story is true or not." Last night, Elmer Davis addressed the National Press Club on psychological warfare and showed three motion pictures illustrating how the OWI was propagandizing on the war front. He had just reached his home when his office called him to hurry down. By 1:45 in the morning, Eastern Wartime, almost the entire public relations staff over at the War Department in Washington also had reported for duty. Now, it should be remembered, of course, that the Germans are quite capable of faking this entire series of reports. Their main reason for doing so, in addition to trying to smoke out Allied plans, would be to try to start a premature uprising by the resistance movement along the Channel coast. But the French and the Belgians and the Dutch have all been warned about this possibility repeatedly. And you will recall that Prime Minister Winston Churchill some time ago warned that we could expect false alarms or diversionary feints before the big show began. The British radio, which at 1 a.m. Eastern Wartime sent a warning to residents of the Dutch coast to evacuate inland to a distance of at least 18 miles, might merely have been broadcasting the latest in the series of such warnings that have been given to the civilian populations all along the so-called invasion coast of Europe. No other British report that might indicate that the invasion is on has been released, unless we are to take as significant the report from London half an hour ago that the Royal Air Force was over enemy territory during the night. Even on the enemy side, there are clear reasons for doubting the German report that the invasion is starting. The Paris radio at 1 a.m. Eastern Wartime said nothing about any invasion operations in its regular news report. In fact, half an hour after the first German broadcast announcing the landing, one German-controlled Paris radio spokesman said of the war situation, and this is a quotation, "It appears we have been given another month of grace before the invasion will start." A press report from Washington says Roosevelt will come to London at the end of June. Surely this indicates the event will not start before the end of June, said the Paris radio. Well, as I said, there is as yet no reason to believe the German story. Nevertheless, because of high public interest in this country, Columbia is planning to continue overtime operations tonight to all of its affiliate stations until such time as the enemy accounts are proved false or official word from Allied sources is forthcoming. You may listen to this network with assurance that all sources of news will be properly labeled and that we will interrupt programs only with news of exceptional importance and will bring you frequent summaries of all information available. The Columbia Shortwave listening station here in New York has heard the British radio report the German announcement of paratroop landings and report the announcement without comment. Then BBC followed that German announcement, which I've already given you, with this, and I quote, "Early this morning, people in German-occupied Western Europe received an urgent warning, broadcast by a spokesman of the Supreme Command of the Allied Expeditionary Force. It was that a new phase of the Allied air offensive has begun. People living within 22 miles of the coast are particularly affected. The German Overseas News Agency, BBC goes on, has been putting out repeated flashes. Here is one of them. Quote, "We have just learned that numerous Allied landing craft and other Allied warships were seen in the area between the Seine estuary and the eastern coast of Normandy." And that was BBC quoting the German report. And now here in the studio with me is Columbia's military analyst, Major George Fielding Elliott. Here is Major Elliott now.
We must begin by assuming by understanding the possibility that these German reports may be an outright German lie. We must also take into account the possibility that they may be a series of feints intended to divert the German defense and to draw the German forces to other places than those in which we actually intend to make a serious attack. They report that a new phase of the Allied air offensive has begun, and the consequent request to the inhabitants of Western Europe to clear an area 22 miles from the coast may mean nothing more than an intensification of bombing attacks, or it may indicate the use of paratroops, or it may be, again, a part of the Allied attempt to throw the Germans off their guard. But if we are to accept the German report as having any value at all, there seems to be some uncertainty as to the location of the Allied landings in France, which they report. It is clear that the Germans are saying that landing craft have been observed approaching the French coast between the eastern shore of what they call the Normandy Peninsula and the mouth of the River Seine, where the port of Le Havre is situated. The Germans are also asserting that this port, Le Havre, is being bombarded, and that Allied paratroops are being landed near the tip of the Normandy Peninsula. What is not clear is the reference made to an Allied landing near the estuary of the River South, which is some distance northeast of Le Havre. This may possibly be an error for the Seine estuary, though the actual German translation has been checked several times here in a CBS shortwave listening station. But to analyze all these German statements, what the Germans call the Normandy Peninsula is undoubtedly the Cotentin Peninsula,
yes, sir,
at the end of which stands the port of Cherbourg. Allied forces would certainly wish, if they were actually landing in France, to obtain a well-equipped seaport as soon as possible, as such a port is essential in order to keep up continuous landings of troops and heavy equipment. We learned at Anville and elsewhere that it is not safe to leave such matters to the mercy of the weather, as has to be done when dependence is had on open beaches,
yes,
or even small but undeveloped bays. Hence, a double Allied attempt against the two chief ports of northern France, Cherbourg and Le Havre, is well within the possibility if we are to accept the German report that landings are taking place at all. From the strategic point of view, there is nothing inconsistent in the report of the landing at the Somme estuary. There is no seaport of importance there, but the Allies might well wish to land on a broad front in order to divert the German attempt as much as possible to keep the Germans from finding out as long as we could where the main effort was being made. The landing of paratroops behind the big seaport of Cherbourg would likewise be probable if the landing was really in progress, in order to cut off the movement of German reserves toward that port and thus facilitate its capture by the Allies. But any military analysis must remain fragmentary and uncertain as long as it is based only on German reports, which have so frequently proved to be unreliable in the past.
That was Columbia's military analyst, Major George Fielding Elliott, and I think that brings us up to date to the moment. I'd like to repeat that there is, as yet, no reason to believe this German story which you have now heard. Nevertheless, because of high public interest in this country, Columbia is planning to continue overtime operations tonight, and I should like to take this opportunity to inform not only you, our audience, but to inform also the staff on duty at our affiliate stations around the country that Columbia is planning overtime operations until such time as the enemy accounts are proved false or official word from Allied sources is forthcoming. So, ladies and gentlemen, you may listen to this network with assurance that all sources of news will be properly labeled and that we will interrupt programs only with news of exceptional importance and will bring you frequent summaries of all information available. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Allied invasion has started. The news to this moment is all supplied by the enemy.
Yes, sir.
The Germans, through the Berlin radio, tell us that the invasion, that's the enemy's word for it, has started. There is no Allied confirmation.
Ready for action.
Shortly after 1 a.m. Eastern Wartime, Columbia's shortwave listening station heard the Berlin radio make this announcement, quote, "Here is a special bulletin. Early this morning, the long-awaited British and American invasion began when paratroops landed in the area of the Somme estuary.
Medic!
The harbor of Le Havre," the Berlin broadcast went on, "is being fiercely bombarded at the present moment. Naval forces of the German Navy are off the coast fighting with enemy landing vessels. We have just brought you a special bulletin. End quote. That was a German radio bulletin. We repeat it for you. It was heard by Columbia's shortwave listening station at the beginning of Berlin's 1 a.m. Eastern Wartime news broadcast to North America. It was repeated in the middle of the program, and there is no confirmation from any Allied source. In fact, the War Department in Washington says it has absolutely no information on these German radio reports. Here is a bulletin from London. Shortly before 1 a.m. Eastern Wartime, the BBC broadcast the Allied High Command's urgent instructions to Holland, advising all people living within 18 miles of the coast to leave their homes immediately and also to keep off roads, railways, and bridges. This may have been another of the series of instructions the Allied High Command has given the people of Europe. The German-controlled Paris radio at 12:45 Eastern Wartime did not mention any invasion in its news bulletins. The Associated Press recorded a German radio broadcast with the same so-called invasion news. Before we read you the broadcast recorded by the Associated Press, please remember two things. Prime Minister Churchill has warned us that there will be many Allied feints, deceptive moves. And we've also been told to expect an invasion story, similar to that we're now relaying to you from the Germans. In this way, the Nazis might hope to make the patriots in the conquered countries reveal themselves, and thus reduce the effectiveness of these troops when our landing does actually start. Now, here's the Transocean broadcast. Quote, early Tuesday morning, numerous landing craft and light warships were observed in the area between the mouth of the Somme and the eastern coast of Normandy. At the same time, paratroops were dropped from numerous aircraft on the northern tip of the Normandy Peninsula. It's believed that these paratroops have been given the task of capturing airfields in order to facilitate the landings of further paratroops. The harbor of Le Havre is at the moment being bombarded. German naval forces have engaged enemy landing craft off the coast. The long-expected Anglo-American invasion appears to have begun. End quote. That's what the Associated Press heard the Berlin radio say. The German agency DNB says Dunkirk and Calais, just across the Channel coast from Britain, are under attack by strong formations of bombers. Transocean said the long-expected invasion by the British and Americans was begun in the first hours of the morning of June 6th by the landing of parachuting in the area of the mouth of the Somme. That was at 7 a.m. German time or at 1 a.m. Eastern Wartime. Please remember that the War Department in Washington has no information on these German reports. Although there is no reason to believe the enemy report, CBS will remain in operation overtime tonight until the facts are known. We repeat, this network will operate beyond regular time until the German report has been verified or has been proved erroneous. Erwin Darlington reporting for CBS World News. CBS, Columbia Broadcasting.
Now CBS presents the music of Lenny Kahn and his orchestra from the Hollywood Palladium on Sunset Boulevard in the heart of the nation's film capital.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. The communique will be repeated. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. This ends the reading of communique number 1 from Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force.
This means invasion. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are back at Columbia's news headquarters, the newsroom in New York. I've just taken the microphone out of the studio again and back into our news headquarters. You have just heard from London Colonel R. Ernest Dupuy of the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Forces, reading communique number 1. Everything to this point has been German reports, and communique number 1 now says, under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. It is now official. The landings have begun, and at this moment here is Columbia's military analyst, Major George Fielding Elliott.
As you just heard from Mr. Trout, the period of doubt is at an end, and we have official announcement of the landing of Allied armies on the northern coast of France. As there's nothing to add to the very bare words of the official communique, it was to be expected that the Allied naval forces would cover the landing and would be engaged in conveying officers to the coast of France, and that there would be strong air support. When there's any further details to give you, we will bring them to you promptly, and we'll try to analyze them for you as well as we can within the limits of the information that we get from time to time. Now, here again is Mr. Trout.
Major George Fielding Elliott has been speaking to you, talking about the invasion. I think we can now call it that. Following the reading of the first communique number 1 from SHAFE. That's what we call Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Forces, somewhere in Great Britain. Rather strangely, you know, just before we switched to London to hear the first communique, we were making this informal tour of the Columbia newsroom, which began at 3 o'clock in the morning, 35 minutes ago. I was standing here in front of the OWI machine and telling you that while all the other news services, the UP, AP, INS, Reuters, all the rest, were sending out all these reports and from Europe, you know, about the German reports, the OWI, which confines itself to official news, sends us the text of the communiques, all that sort of thing. The OWI was printing almost nothing, and since the beginning of the day, since midnight, the OWI has put on only one bulletin, or rather one response of any kind, saying that the Romanian radio reported enemy planes over Belgrade. And, of course, a few moments after I said that, we switched you to London so that you could hear Colonel Dupuy reading these communiques. And of course, at that moment, after I came out of the studio on the OWI machine, here is what is now printed. OWI 2, meaning the second bulletin since midnight. OWI 2, flash. Supreme Headquarters announces Allies begin operations on northern coast of France. Bulletin. Communique said, under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces supported by strong air forces began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. 3:34 p.m. Eastern Wartime from Washington. That's what the Office of War Information wire says. Still looking over the machines now in a way is rather speculative. The whole character of this broadcast has changed. And it has changed rather abruptly, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, if you've been staying with us. You know, we started, sometime after midnight. I guess it was about 20 minutes to 1 in the morning Eastern Wartime. The Germans began putting these reports out. We were seeing these different reports, and then 3 o'clock in the morning, a little more than 35 minutes ago, we took this microphone here in our studio, which is joined to Columbia News in New York, and pointed out here the news machine. We began taking you on an informal tour to show you what a newsroom is like at this hour. And now I hear that we must go to London in a few moments. Ladies and gentlemen, for a broadcast from Columbia's correspondent Edward R. Merrill, we take you now to London.
In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on the other front,
You will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeat in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all receive the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. This order was distributed to assault elements after their departure, and read by appropriate commanders to all other troops in the Allied Expeditionary Force. I return you now to the United States.
Now we're back at Columbia's news headquarters again in New York. At this moment, we're in the studio. As a matter of fact, we have come into the studio now with this unusual arrangement so that we can hear the speaker and hear what Mr. Merrill was saying. That was Edward R. Merrill, Columbia's correspondent in London. Now we're back out in the newsroom with our long cable, and once again, here is Columbia's military analyst, Major George Fielding Elliott.
The Allied invasion of Western Europe, as you know, has begun. Such an operation, carrying thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops across water to land them on a hostile shore, is one of the most dangerous of all military operations. There have been few such vast military amphibious operations in all history. Some have failed, but some have succeeded. And no such operation has ever been prepared for the thoroughness of this Allied landing on the European continent. The Allies have been getting ready for it for years. The British have been looking forward to this day ever since Dunkirk. And the moment the United States got into the war, our military leaders realized that the main road to the defeat of Germany lay through the occupied lands of Western Europe, and they began to plan accordingly. Our leaders have also realized that they must strike with overwhelming force. In some military operations, an initial repulse might have little effect, but in this European invasion, it might be fatal, for it would be a disastrous blow to the morale of the people of the conquered nations. So, the plans for the invasion were more complex and more complete than any that military strategists have ever had to work out before. Germany's dash across the Low Countries and France was simple in comparison. So was the German attack on Russia, vast as that operation was. The Allied landings in North Africa and in Sicily involved similar problems to this one, but they were on a far smaller scale. The opposition was much lighter. Nevertheless, the experience gained in these operations has been invaluable in planning for this one. We don't know as yet the details of the first landing operation, but usually an invasion force strikes in three ways.
Ready for more.
First comes the assault force, which is composed mainly of infantry, supported sometimes by light tanks, and usually also including assault engineers. Its job is to strike quickly, to break up initial enemy resistance, and to secure a foothold on the shore. Before it can land, of course, it must have the support of bombing and fighting planes and of naval artillery. And you will remember that General Eisenhower's first communique emphasized the strong naval and air support which our landing was receiving. How quickly these first waves can get ashore depends on the strength of the enemy's defenses and on the effectiveness with which those defenses are reduced by bombardment.
We take you now, in a few moments, for another broadcast to the British Isles. In a moment or two, our signal will be ready. We take you now to London.
Here is the text of a report sent to London by Herbert M. Sarge for the networks of the United States. The
is Herbert M. Clark in a takeoff report from a live expeditionary base. I don't have to explain what the takeoff is. When you hear this, you'll know that a live force has leaped the gap between the bases in the United Kingdom and the coast of France. We'll be there, and we'll be there to stay as you listen. As I write this, we're in an unnamed port on an unnamed coast, one of the quirks of military security. But it's a funny thing about security. A week ago in London, I was in a state of constant irritation with security judges. It was obviously German radio reports that knew things we knew but couldn't say. Since then, I've been living and sleeping aboard the flagship of an Allied assault force, one of the several which are going to hit the Hun very, very north. And I find the feeling knows less than you said he did. Because in here we've had exactly one air allowed. A net, not a raid or a determined reconnaissance. And I also find that I don't object so much to security. My loyalty and responsibility to you back home is overridden by loyalty and responsibility to the soldiers on this boat and the sailors who are carrying them to the beachhead. That objective is also, for the moment, unidentifiable, because the place we've picked for our main landing is one Jerry hadn't figured on, and I don't want to be the one to tell him that our sector is the one where his counterattack should go. The Nazis have been badly outguessed on this whole show. He's going to be surprised by the direction of the attack, and he's going to get a shock by the timing. The master race has fallen down again. I'm treating all this as though it had already happened. Maybe that's a mistake, but it's a reflection of the overwhelming confidence of the troops involved and the confidence I've drawn from the tremendous scale of the preparations. We haven't yet moved from our anchorage, but all morning this coastal strip has been full of movement. Ladies and gentlemen, I will digress if the next few sentences will be semi-numerous. There are ships in the task forces which are striking, British, Canadian, and American. They range from big cruise carriers and supply ships down to landing craft. Other vessels, landing craft, which make most of the journey, piggyback on bigger ships, are in the fleet. Now I admit that I can't conceive of a fleet of ships myself, but I do know that's as far as I can see from the bridge of this ship. Others are dotting the water thickly, and I can see about 30 square miles of water. Well, ships, I'm told, half the force. Double it, and you'll have the whole. And they're all loaded with fighting men and fighting weapons, some of them still secret. For some hours, the vanguard of our force is trying to deal with specific coastal objectives in our sector of Nazi Europe, and landing craft lumbering through a choppy sea so slowly that they must start well ahead of time to get to their assigned places at their appointed times. These ships have been moving out. I'm speaking ashore by the last available channel of communication. We'll be following those ships soon, and I hope to be back with you before long with some harder facts. This is Herbert Clark reporting from the flagship of an Allied assault invasion force for the networks of the United States. I'm returning now to the United States.
Once again in the studio adjoining Columbia's newsroom at Columbia's news headquarters in New York City. This is Bob Trout speaking again. And now once again you'll hear the noise of the bells as I open the door, take the microphone out on the long cable to the newsroom itself. That seems to be the quickest way to get the news to you as it's coming in so rapidly. We started this as a very informal tour about 45 minutes ago when we didn't know that it was invasion. As a matter of fact, the Germans were the only people who had been putting out the reports. And in a few moments, I'd like to sort of sum the thing up for you so we can see where we are at the moment. But it seems that the story is now at this stage at which interruptions come. Things come in so quickly that it's almost impossible to find time to go back and sum up. We've had the first dispatch from London. We sometimes have to interrupt each other here. Rapid as London in only a few seconds to do it. So our broadcast will abrupt at some point or another, but we're trying to keep it as quickly as possible. And so when we get word that London has something, we just cut whatever we can and go as quickly as possible. Now, I think we'll have to be the best way to get out the station here from the driving home at the sense in which Colonel Dupree announced in London that this really was an invasion and not just a German trick. I think the best way to bring ourselves up to date is go back to this associated press machine in front of which I'm standing. Start at the copy at 3:33 a.m. in the morning. That's 1 minute after we'd switched to London. And here's what it says. Flash. That's a very rare thing, you know, in the news world. Allies land in France. Immediately afterwards, bulletin. The Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, June 6 AP. General Dwight D. Eisenhower's headquarters announced today that Allied troops began landing on the northern coast of France, strongly supported by naval and air forces. The text of the communique, quote, under the command of General Eisenhower,
Yes,
Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. In 5 seconds, I hear we again will get an official report from London. Go ahead, London.
General Dwight D. Eisenhower. This statement will be followed by other messages to the people from countries on the western coast of Europe which are occupied by the enemy. The Supreme Commander, Allied Expeditionary Force, General Dwight D. Eisenhower.
People of Western Europe. A landing was made this morning on the coast of France by troops of the Allied Expeditionary Force. This landing is part of the concerted United Nations plan for the liberation of Europe, made in conjunction with our great Russian allies. I have no presents for all of you. Although the initial assault may not have been made in your own country, the hour of your liberation is approaching. All faces, men and women, young and old, have a part to play in the achievement of final victory.
Yes,
To
sir.
members of resistance movements, whether led by national or by outside leaders, I say, follow the instructions you have received. To patriots who are not members of
Yes, sir.
organized resistance groups, outposts,
Yes, sir.
continue your country resistance, but do not needlessly
Got it, sir.
endanger your lives. Wait until I give you the signal to rise and strike the enemy.
Got it, sir.
The day will come when I shall need your united strength. Until that
Yes,
day,
sir.
I call on you for the hard task of discipline and restraint. Citizens of France, I am proud to have again under my command the gallant
Got it,
forces
sir.
of France. Fighting beside their allies, they will play a worthy part in the liberation of their homeland. Because the initial landing has been made on the soil of your country, I repeat to you with even greater emphasis my message to the peoples of other occupied countries in Western Europe. Follow the instructions of your leaders. A premature uprising of all country may prevent you from
Got it,
being
sir.
of maximum help to your country during a critical hour. Prepare.
Yes, sir.
As Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, there is imposed on me the duty and responsibility of taking all measures necessary to the prosecution of the war. Prompt and willing obedience to the orders that I shall issue to the country.
Yes, sir.
The country's civil administration of France must be provided by French. All persons must continue in their present duties unless otherwise instructed.
Got it, sir.
Those who have made common cause with the enemy and those who face the country will be noted. When the country is declared from your part,
Yes, sir.
you yourself will choose your representative
Let him have
and
it.
the government under which you wish to live. Any further loss of so very they are part of the country. That I shall all my power to do. I know that I can find one to get that. Heroic deeds of what you did. And their good right. And strengthen throughout the country. As women, jackets, and a new birth of relatives. All upon all persons in the town. Your faith is on. Our arms are ready. Ready to go. You will not hear the King of Norway. It necessary to invoke our leadership.
Landsmen, from these distant to war, that we use the start. Then we have now that tree, habit, darko in part. Then men, around the motor, the deep, again names the blaze. But we don't think the line, we can end. At the idea of Joko, no, have heard of a God stipulating of the lion who scion of the moon.
Got it, sir.
No, ikke bortfall, gå til noen forhastet eller uoverlagt handling. Men i tiden fremover sier det at en endnu større betydning enn før, og lægge gennem alle tænkelige hindringer i vejen.
Got it,
Det
sir.
må ske på en slik måde. Samtidig ved uforsigtighed udleverer sig selv eller andre. Nuværende har flere organisationer, som samarbejder med de allierede militære autoriteter, står i fokus. De har fået sine bestemte opgaver at løse, og det er så nye ordre. Hele tiden er noget, det trænger skjulelse. Eller magt, eller mening. Det er altid på. Også på den måde kan mange uskyldige komme til at yde et mega dybelt indsats i forløbskamp. Jeg og min regering sender en varm hilsen til alle landsmænd, der står rent på sin post, og som opfattelig og tillidsfuldt går fremme med stadig mere krævende opgaver. Du har allierede styrke overkommanderet. Om valghandlen så er alle, som står under hans kommando. Og gennemfører eller på anden måde. Det er vokset, vigtigt og så i kontakt med sine konstitutionelle myndigheder. Ligheden er en god farfor, som noget så i en kamp. Og vi driver dem med det varmeste øl. Vi ved, at vi ikke vil svigte vores tætning. Og vi lover, at vi aldrig vil svigte den. Langsomt, hold sammen, vive de kriminelle nationers hej, vive frihed.
Got it, sir.
For the people of Norway. Strategic plan which aims at liberating the oppressed people of Europe. The war in the West has today entered a new phase. We have all received this news with a profound feeling of joy and satisfaction. As we realize that our forces are thereby carried a good way further on the road to victory and liberation. Heartened by these developments, our people must not allow their enthusiasm to lead them into premature or unpremeditated acts. From now on,
Yes, sir.
however, it is even greater importance than heretofore
Yes, sir.
to defeat the enemy by all subtle and cunning means that cannot expose yourself or others. This order does not apply
Try
to
this.
organized resistance groups who are in touch with the Allied military authorities. They have been given their special orders, and they will receive further orders. These they will carry out in the knowledge that if they are in need of a hiding place, or food, or any other help, they will always find it.
Yes, sir.
In this way also many of you will be able quietly to take an effective part in the battle for freedom. I and my government warmly salute all compatriots who stand firm at their posts
Let him have it.
and to look forward
Got it,
to
sir.
ever more exacting tasks in a spirit of self-sacrifice and confidence.
Get it.
The Supreme Allied Commander will at all times
Yes, sir.
about what is expected of everyone under his command. And over the radio and by other means, our people will continue to be in close
Got it, sir.
contact with their constitutional authorities. We salute the forces which have now gone into battle.
Our thoughts
Yes,
and
sir.
warmest wishes go with them. We know that they will not
Got it,
fail us,
sir.
and we promise never to fail them. Fellow countrymen, together and be prepared. Long live the cause of freedom of Russia.
Got it, sir.
Long live the cause of freedom. Veterans for translation of King Hawkins Station. Unity number 1, issued by the Team Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, will now be repeated.
Give me round.
Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. You will now have the Prime Minister on the network, His
Yes, sir.
Excellency Professor Brandy.
Yes, sir.
Mannen en vrouwen van Nederland.
Get it!
Nu het grote ogenblik gekomen is waarop het vanavond strijdkrachten van een machtigen aanval zijn overgegaan vanuit het westen,
Got
heb
it,
ik
sir.
enkele zeer ernstige woorden tot u gezegd.
Yes, sir.
Verzoek u hiernaar met het grootst mogelijke aandacht te luisteren en mijn woorden, met achting van alle noodzakelijke veiligheidsmaatregelen, door te geven aan de betrouwbare landgenoten die niet in de gelegenheid waren naar mij te luisteren. Landgenoten, nu de geallieerde motorslag neerkomt op Hitler's Atlantic Wall, gaat door ons allen een siddering van ontroering.
Yes, sir.
Een bemanning van leger, vloot, luchtmacht en compagnie hebben de taak te vervullen welke aan
Got
hen
it, sir.
door de militairen opperbevelhebber is toebedeeld. In de harten van ons allen steekt de dringende bede op God en Almachtige om hulp en bijstand in deze vooral door rechtvaardige strijd. In nauw overleg
Let him
met
have
de
it.
geallieerden opperbevelhebber geef ik u daarom de volgende orde, waaraan ik verwacht dat iedere Nederlander die van goede wille is, zich zal houden. Mijn
Yes, sir.
orders richten zich
Move
niet
out. Keep
op
going.
die speciale gevechtsgroepen die hun eigen orders hebben ontvangen en daaraan gevolgd zullen worden. Ik richt mijn instructies tot hen die niet lid zijn van die speciale gevechtsgroepen. Ik wil toestellen van de daadwerkelijk openlijk verdediging. Zou zijn brieven van ons dat de gelegenheid bieden secretariërs te nemen en zeevragen te worden.
Yes, sir.
Zij die redeneren dat de vijanden hun leven fijn hebben en ze zich niet willen laten weerhouden van iedere vorm van directe hulpverlening, zij op het hart verbonden dat de represailles zich zouden uitstrekken over vele onschuldigen. Wij kennen den Duitsers. En ik herhaal dus met klem, geen gewelddadig, openlijk verzet. 3. Maar daarentegen wel geschieden moet is, overal waar onzichtbaar en onherkenbaar een verzet over is, moet
Yes,
het
sir.
onverbiddelijk worden geboden. 4. Daarnaast dient hij alles na te laten wat een vijand van enig direct of indirect voordeel zou kunnen zijn. 5.
Got it,
Kan
sir.
geen enkel middel verkennen om te provoceren of te misleiden. Wees overal waar hij gaat of staat verhoeden. Luister alleen naar de aanwijzingen die wij van hieruit geven. 6. Zodra van u een krachtiger actie wordt verwacht, zal dit op een onmiskenbare wijze van hieruit worden duidelijk gemaakt. Nederlanders, bid met ons om de zegen. Leven het vaderland.
Here is a translation of the statement just made by the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Men and women of the Netherlands,
Got it,
Now
sir.
that the great moment has arrived, and the Allied forces have started to attack from the west, I have some very solemn words to say to you. I request that you listen to the and you observe all necessary security measures to pass on my words to trustworthy people who have not been in a position to listen to them. Fellow countrymen,
Yes, sir.
now that the Allied sledgehammer blow is falling on Hitler's Atlantic wall, we are all thrilled with emotion. Our men of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Merchant Navy have to fulfill the task allotted to them by the military commanders. From the hearts of all of us rises the earnest prayer to the Almighty for help and assistance in what is for us so righteous a struggle. In close deliberation with the Allied High Command, I therefore give you the following order, which I expect every Dutchman of
Got it,
goodwill
sir.
to keep. These orders do not apply to those organized resistance groups who have received their orders and who will obey them. It is to those who are not members of organized resistance groups that I address these instructions. 1. You will not perpetrate any acts of violent open resistance. It would only offer the cruel enemy an opportunity to take far bloodier reprisals than ever before. 2. Those prove that they are ready to sacrifice their life and therefore do not wish to refrain from any form of direct assistance are able to
Got it,
consider
sir.
that the reprisals
Ready for
will
more.
occasionally innocent people. We know the Germans. And I therefore request, with emphasis,
Yes, sir.
no
Let him in.
violent open resistance. This, however, must be done. Wherever invisible and unrecognizable passive resistance occurs, it must be
Got it, sir.
immediately forthcoming. Apart from this, you refrain from any act of any direct or indirect advantage. The enemy will not fail to employ any means of promoting wherever you may be, watch your own behavior. All of it, to the instructions which we give you from here.
Yes, sir.
6. As soon as more forceful action is required of you, this will be made clear from here in unmistakable
Oh, the
fashion.
shot. Yes, sir.
Dutchmen, pray with us to victory. Long live the fatherland.
Got it, sir.
That ends the translation of the
Yes,
statement
sir.
made by the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. You will next hear the Prime Minister of Belgium, Monsieur Hubert Pierre. L'heure attendue par vous est proche. Les opérations préliminaires pour la libération de l'Europe vont commencer. Cet assaut initial est l'annonce certaine de votre délivrance. Vous allez vivre des jours difficiles,
Yes, sir.
dans une attente anxieuse. C'est le moment de montrer une fois de plus
Got it, sir.
les qualités de discipline et de maîtrise de vous-même dont vous avez donné tant d'exemples depuis 4 ans. La première règle à suivre sera de modérer votre impatience. La seconde, de ne pas vous laisser tromper par les excitations perfides de l'ennemi et de ne pas vous laisser rentrer
Keep moving.
dans des actions prématurées qui ne pourraient avoir pour résultat que de terribles représailles. Les Alliés vous sont reconnaissants de la magnifique résistance que vous avez montrée sous l'oppression allemande et le gouvernement est convaincu que vous ferez tout ce qui est possible pour contribuer à détraquer la machine de guerre de l'ennemi.
Move out. Keep low.
Le succès final de l'effort militaire aujourd'hui
sir.
commencé dépend en grande partie de la force que vous conserverez pour le moment décisif. Vous souhaiteriez que nous vous demandions tout de suite tout l'effort dont vous êtes capable. Est une résistance organisée, déjà en possession de ces sabotages clandestins sont maintenant plus utiles. À tous les patriotes, je dis, obéissez avec une discipline complète à tous les ordres qui vous sont donnés par le commandement suprême allié et par votre gouvernement. Mais soyez attentifs à discerner les fausses consignes qui pourraient être lancées par l'ennemi. Ne croyez pas, les rumeurs sont contrôlées. La seule façon de vérifier votre méfiez-vous des agences provocateurs. Le moment du succès n'est pas encore venu. Lorsqu'il aura sonné, vous entrez avertis par le commandement allié et par le gouvernement. On vous dira alors, clairement, que l'on attend de vous. Pour perfectionner vos organisations, afin qu'au moment voulu, leur action soit pleinement dans les souffrances actives qui marqueront peut-être la dernière phase de la guerre, où les ennemis devront jamais montrer un mutuel dévouement. Et toutes les ressources encore disponibles devront être employées à la misère et qui se trouver. Les mots que nous vous envoyons sont courage, discipline, solidarité, confiance. There is a combination of the ship, just made by the Prime Minister of Britain.
My beloved countrymen, the hour so long awaited by you is here. Preliminary operations for the liberation of Europe have begun. This first assault is the certain signal for your deliverance. You are going to undergo difficult days in a period of anxious waiting. This is the time to show once again those qualities of discipline and self-control which for 4 years you have so often displayed.
Get ready for a fight.
The first
Got it,
rule
sir.
is to moderate concentration. The second is not to let yourselves be fooled by any of the enemy's treacherous provocations.
Yes, sir.
And not to let yourselves be embroiled in any
Yes, sir.
premature action which could result in terrible reprisals.
Fire and infantry.
The Allies are grateful
Did it.
for the magnificent resistance that you have shown under German oppression. And the government is convinced that you will do everything possible to contribute to the overthrow of the German war machine. The final success of the military undertaking which began stands largely on the fact that you can prepare for the decisive moment. You naturally want us to demand of you immediately all the effort of which you are capable. But the organized resistance, which already has its orders, and clandestine tactics, are at this moment of more use. To all patriots, I say,
Yes,
obey
sir.
with complete discipline all the orders given you by the Supreme Allied Command and by your government. But be on the
Got it,
alert
sir.
for false orders, which might be issued by the enemy. Do not believe uncontrolled rumors. The only way to check the genuineness of any news is to make sure it is different from Allied radio stations. Above all, trust agents and officers. The moment of supreme combat has not yet come. When it does, you will be warned of it by the Allied command and by your government. You will then be clearly told what is expected of you. Use the period that intervenes to perfect your organization, so that at the desired moment, their action may be fully effective.
the increased suffering which perhaps will mark the last phase of the war, all Belgians must, more than ever before,
Hell of a shot.
and use all resources still available to relieve
Yes,
the
sir.
suffering of those most sorely tried. The watchwords we send you are
Got it, sir.
unity and confidence. That ends the translation of the Belgian Prime Minister's statement.
Yes, sir.
Communique number 1. Free headquarters, Allied expedition report.
Yes, sir.
Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. This concludes the broadcast from Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expedition Report. This is the home and overseas service.
Between the Germans and invasion forces on the Normandy Peninsula, about 31 miles southwest of Le Havre. Another bulletin also from Berlin radio and unconfirmed says the British-American landing operations against the western coast of Europe from the sea and from the air are stretching over the entire area between Cherbourg and Le Havre, a distance of about 60 miles. I repeat, there is no confirmation. Here's another bulletin just in. A&B, the German agency says that this is unconfirmed, that the most important airdromes in the area of the Normandy Peninsula of France have been wiped out. Now, I presume that means wiped out by July. As you may have heard on earlier broadcasts, all three German news agencies have begun broadcasting these stories that the invasion is here. But there is no live confirmation as yet. The first report came out shortly after midnight. And then we get one report from Berlin. Paris radio, strangely enough, has not confirmed any of these reports. And now, we have just been informed that we can expect in a very few seconds, a very important broadcast from the British capital. And so now, we take you to London.
Another one down. Yes, sir. Got it, sir.
Positionary form.
Yes, sir.
The text of communique number 1 will be released to the national radio of the United Nations in 10 seconds. Repeat, 10
Got it, sir.
seconds from now. Under the command of
is New York, NBC Newsroom again. Men and women of the United States, this is a momentous hour in world history. This is the invasion of Hitler's Europe, the 0 hour of the Second Front. The men of General Dwight Eisenhower are leaving their landing barges, fighting their way up the beaches into the fortress of Nazi Europe. They are moving in from the sea to attack the enemy under a mammoth cloud of fighter planes, under a ceiling of screaming shells from Allied warships.
Sir.
The first news flashes do not say, but a large proportion of this assault is believed to be in the hands of American men. They are making the attack side by side with the British Tommies who were bombed and blasted out of Europe at Dunkirk. Now, at this hour, they are bombing and blasting their way back again. This is the European front, once again being established in fire and blood, not only by the Americans and British, but by many allies in the fight against Axis aggression. This is the supreme test of Allied spirit and of Allied weapons. The world's greatest military undertaking is underway. Casualties in this mammoth operation, in the subsequent drive inland, may reach a dreadful toll. The German war machine is still powerful and is still strongly entrenched. Our invasion forces are on the offensive against Nazi troops who have been ordered to die rather than retreat. However, die or retreat they must, for this attack up the shores of Europe is being made with all the strength the Allied command can throw into battle. Eisenhower, the commander, has promised that his men will bring victory in Europe in 1944. The first aim of the Americans and the British will be to secure their beachheads, and then the capture or building of airfields so that our planes from European bases can carry on the task of blasting loose the enemy from his prepared positions farther back. That task now is assigned to our planes flying out of England right now. You have already heard the flash that came from London. The flash, the official Allied announcement that the invasion of Western Europe has begun, that D-Day is here, that H hour has struck. Air power paved the way for this mighty assault in the West. Nazi targets have been hammered day and night in an offensive which has steadily grown in destructive violence. Thousands of planes each day have flown cross-channel up from Italy and Africa to tear up German gun emplacements which have been 4 years in the making. Airfields have been knocked out of operation, and the German Air Force, with its wings very badly clipped, has been based farther and farther inland. Closer and closer to the German homeland itself.
Quite unexpected.
And now, well, let me go on a little bit more. These Allied airfoes were methodically driven home to prepare the way for amphibious assault.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, for a special broadcast, we take you to London, England.
Give him hell! Go!
10 seconds. Stand by. 8 seconds. 5 seconds. Stand by. 3, 2.
The following is the order of the day issued today by General Eisenhower to each individual of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Got it, sir.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God.